Hello and welcome to TMRO. I'm Jade, this is Athena, and this is Lisa. And today in news, we will be speaking about
bubble curtains possibly saving the world?
And can green tea cure heart disease?
And later, of course, we're going to have an interesting roundtable discussion about prosthetics, the future, present, and past. And of course, we'll take a look at your comments from the last science show. This is TMRO Science Discovery 1.06. And before we get into news, we want to give a huge thank you to our Escape Velocity citizens. These folks contribute $10 in an episode or $30 a month. Every little bit helps, and we wouldn't be able to continue making these amazing shows if it weren't for you. If you would like to become a citizen of TMRO, head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. All right, Athena. So apparently bubble curtains are going to be saving the world, so that's pretty nice. I mean, I think I could sleep better at night now, knowing that something as cute as bubble curtains are going to be helping me exist. So
yeah, it sounds super cute. I love the name, but it really has to do a lot with hurricanes. Now, hurricanes, a lot of us have known, have really impacted societies all over the world. It's affected millions of people. Actually, Hurricane George, which hit Puerto Rico in 1998, affected 1.3 million people, including destroying homes and also taking away lives. So it's really important to understand how exactly hurricanes can possibly be prevented, and this is exactly what scientists are working on right now. They're doing this through something known as the bubble curtain method. It consists of taking a pipe with holes in it, dipping it down in water deep enough to where the temperatures are pretty cold, and then raising the pipe up to the surface area where the water is a lot hotter. And so by doing this, the bubbles are released out of the pipes from the colder temperature waters, and when it mixes with the hotter water, it actually brings the sea surface temperature down, specifically below 26.5 degrees Celsius. And this temperature is really important because this is typically when tropical storms start to form and can develop into hurricanes. Now, right now, around the world, surface temperatures of the seas are actually increasing. During hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria, the sea surface temperature of the Gulf of Mexico reached a high of 32 degrees Celsius. So what scientists are exploring right now is to try and find a way to bring the surface temperature below that 26.5 degrees Celsius. And some original ideas that they were exploring were cloud seeding, which is adding sea salt molecules to clouds. This makes them whiter in color and it makes them more reflective, which could reduce the sea surface temperatures. Another method was to tow icebergs from the Arctic to these regions where tropical hurricanes happen, like the Gulf of Mexico. And then another was to release the dry ice from aircraft near areas of where hurricanes happen. But in Norway, they've actually been using this bubble curtaining technique for quite a while now, but for the opposite temperature changes, where the waters in the winter are very, very cold, much colder at the surface rather than in the depth of the oceans. And so what they would do is dip the pipes deep enough to reach the warmer waters and then rise the pipes up to bring the warmer water to the colder levels of the water, and this actually prevents the water at the surface from icing over during the winters. This is like a gorgeous picture from Iceland. I love this one. And what's really cool is this research was actually recently granted funding from Innovation Norway, and lead researcher Olav Holly Sauter has actually teamed up with Sintef, which is one of Europe's largest independent research organizations. And they're actually using this type of bubble curtaining for oil spills. And they'll now be working in collaboration for these bubble curtains and possibly use them along the Yucatan Strait to help prevent future hurricanes and saving lives one bubble at a time. So I think that's like really cool, and I love that image of the Yucatan Strait. Because it's a really large area, and that really is where tropical storms start to form, because you have this mix of the cold air and then the hot water, and it just constantly has like a mix of currents. And I mean, I've experienced a lot of hurricanes personally coming from New York, and it's insane. So to think that we'd be able to maybe do this where we use bubble curtains just all along the strait would be really cool, and it would help a lot.
Exactly. And I always think it's so bonkers when we can do anything technology or engineering wise that could potentially affect the weather as an entire system? Because, I mean, nature is a force to be reckoned with, obviously, and it just seems so out of our control. But the fact, like things like cloud seeding and, these little things that we can do to kind of influence the weather patterns and whatnot, it's just always mind-blowing to me, because it's like we're in this giant, planet, and then all of a sudden you can actually influence what the atmosphere's doing. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Super cool. Yeah.
It's really crazy.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, on from bubble curtains and into fat, apparently there is a new link between fat, energy, and diabetes, which I am quite interested in. So please tell me more about that, Lisa.
Well, there's a group of over 40 scientists from a whole bunch of different institutions, including the University of Copenhagen and Harvard Medical School, and they found a link between energy, fat, and diabetes. They published a study in the scientific journal Cell Metabolism on May 31st of this year, so super recent. They actually looked at brown fat tissue. Now, we all know that we have fat in our bodies, but there's different types. We've got white fat and brown fat. Brown fat actually burns energy to generate heat, whereas white fat is the fat that you might be familiar with. And inside the cells of white fat and brown fat, they're different on the inside as well. So white fat just has one big giant glob of fat inside the cell, whereas the brown fat has smaller globs of fat and lots of mitochondria, which you might remember from high school science. Mitochondria are like the energy powerhouses of the cell, and they generate all the energy for our body. And actually, it turns out that babies have more brown fat than adults do. As we get older, we start to lose this brown fat. Although apparently now there's this kind of new thought that there's now a beige kind of fat, like in between brown and white, that's can be turned into brown fat with some modification. But that's a whole other topic for another day. But how does brown fat actually work? Well, the brown fat gets activated by cold temperatures. So you can see here, there's a mouse. It's being exposed to about 5 degrees Celsius. And inside those cells of brown fat, the fat globules, and also lots of the mitochondria, which you can see is the brown globs there. And the mitochondria are making lots and lots of energy. And there's actually a specific enzyme in there called cardiolipin synthase 1, and it makes a molecule called cardiolipin. But why is cardiolipin important? Well, it turns out it's important for this brown fat process to turn energy directly into heat to keep you warm when you're exposed to really cold temperatures. And so the cardiolipin gets made, and it signals to the nucleus of the cell and the DNA to keep making more and more of a specific gene called UCP1. And it also stimulates that thermogenesis, or generating heat. And it also makes the brown fat cells take in more glucose because, of course, if you want to make energy, you need a fuel. And for our bodies, that's glucose. But it also increases insulin sensitivity. Well, what does insulin have to do with all this? If you know anyone with diabetes, you might know that insulin is related to glucose and the glucose in our bloodstream, because it helps us take the glucose from the blood into our cells. So cardiolipin, this is the important molecule that these scientists were studying, is really important for increasing insulin sensitivity as well. But how does that all relate to what the researchers are actually doing? Well, sometimes the best way to find out how this whole system works and why cardiolipin is so important for brown fat is to actually break the system. So that's what they did. They took some mice and they knocked out that gene for a cardiolipin synthase, or the factory that makes cardiolipin. And so these mice didn't have this cardiolipin factory anymore, and they couldn't make any cardiolipin. So then they kind of figured out what happened to the mice, and the bad effects that happened kind of showed if you break the system, that's why cardiolipin is so important. So they took the knocked out mice, or the mice with no cardiolipin, and the regular mice, and they put them in the cold to see the differences. Now, we have an electron microscope image stack here of the brown fat cells inside of the control mouse, or the normal mouse that didn't have this kind of inability to make cardiolipin. And you can see the white is the blood vessels, the dark brown dots are the fat globules, and the smaller brown dots are the mitochondria. There's heaps and heaps of small brown dots, heaps of mitochondria, and the fat globules are pretty small, just like you'd expect in normal brown fat tissue. But in the mice that couldn't make cardiolipin, it's a big difference. There are huge globules of fat, hardly any bits of blood vessels, and hardly any mitochondria as well. There's hardly any tiny little brown dots. So now these poor mice that can't make cardiolipin have giant fat globules in their brown fat cells. And if this is a little bit too hard to visualize, we've actually got a computer-generated diagram of what that would actually look like in 3D. So on the left, you can see the control mouse, the mouse that was still normal, and as you'd expect, small globs of fat and lots of mitochondria. The mitochondria are in green in this image. And on the right, huge fat globules and not so much mitochondria for the poor mice that can't make cardiolipin anymore. And so it kind of turns out that the mice without cardiolipin turned out to be less cold tolerant. They burned less energy and they took in less glucose as well. So the top left-hand graph you can see there, the mice that couldn't make cardiolipin is the red line, and they were much, much less tolerant of the cold. And if you look at the very bottom right-hand graph, you can see the red again is the cardiolipin mice that couldn't make it. And again, they couldn't take in that much glucose from their bloodstream, which means they have lots and lots of glucose staying around in their blood and not getting into the cells where it needs to be. And we have another image that shows the effect of giving those mice insulin, just like how anyone with diabetes, if they have high blood sugar, they put in insulin in their bodies and it fixes everything. Well, with these mice here, giving them insulin didn't really take the glucose out of their bloodstream. It didn't work on them. And so we call this insulin resistance. And you might have heard that term before because it's basically the road to diabetes. If your insulin is not working to get the glucose into your blood cells, you're pretty much guaranteed to get diabetes after that. So you need to really kind of figure out what's going on and fix that. But let's bring it back to humans because this is all in mice, right? And
exactly.
How does it's not relatable for something that's happening in a mouse. It might not be the same in humans. But the researchers thought that this had enough merit that they looked at humans as well. And they looked at a specific genetic mutation in people from Denmark. It was a mutation in the cardiolipin synthase, the factory that makes cardiolipin. And they found that people with this mutation couldn't make as much cardiolipin and they had greater rates of diabetes and insulin resistance. So it seems like the link is there in humans as well. And it means if we can find a way to boost levels of cardiolipin in people's cells, then we might reduce their risk of getting insulin resistance or diabetes. So we might be on the road to the future of helping people here with diabetes and stopping them from getting it. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, diabetes, of course, onset is still a pretty serious issue, at least here in the States and I'm sure worldwide as well. So all of this interest in all of this research and going into, as you said, into mice studies, but then being able to extrapolate that to the human system is always really useful. And I really look forward to seeing where this kind of evolves because coming from like the health and fitness industry, diabetes is one of those things that can be very pervasive in certain clients. And so the more research I think the better because it can definitely put a damper on your lifestyle for sure.
One of the really cool things about this research too is that it was completely open access. I didn't have to pay to get the paper. I didn't have to pay to get the image. It was all funded by the European Research Council, and so it was made available to everybody. I think that's really important too.
Absolutely, definitely. Well, thank you for that. So, speaking of what goes on inside of our bodies, apparently there is something about our gut and something living in our gut that can dictate how long we live. Possible immortality. I don't know, Athena. Why don't you explain it to us?
Yeah, so speaking about humans and our health, there's this really cool study I was reading on about what really can help aid us in living longer. A lot of us really know that what affects us and the way that we really live our everyday lives is truly what we ingest as human beings. So now what about living longer? Scientists have been doing very intensive studies lately on this subject and been trying to analyze specifically what happens in our gut. And there's some living creatures where they take in food and they have really significant outcomes. Take fruit flies, for example. Fruit flies, as crazy as it sounds, are actually about 70% similar to mammals on a biochemical comparison. So because of this, scientists have been conducting quite a lot of studies on them. They created some food consisting of probiotics and an herbal supplement known as Triphala and fed them to half of the fruit flies. And that half that actually had ingested these, it prolonged their life by 60% compared to the fruit flies that were not fed the supplements. I mean, now what I'm curious about, and I'm sure you guys are, is really what the science is behind us, what's actually happening. Now, inside of the gut, there's a bacteria called a microbiota, and they exist there to help metabolize food. And there's a direct communication between the brain and these microorganisms, the microbiota, and this is referred to as the gut-brain axis. this communication system is very impactful on our digestive system. There's been multiple studies that have shown a direct relation of neuropathological changes like irritable bowel syndrome, neurodegeneration, and even depression. So having a healthy gut and levels of bacteria in there to break down the food is extremely important. So specifically, the reason they use probiotics to add it into this, the reason they used probiotics and added it into the supplements that they fed to the fruit flies was because probiotics have been shown to really change the structure of the gut, the microbiota, which is that microorganism we were talking about inside the gut. Probiotics are shown to really change how our bodies also metabolize food. And so by adding just one single probiotic formulation, it can really affect the biochemical signaling pathways, which directly impacts the physical effects. Again, the gut-brain axis. So here, if you're adding the probiotics, it really is going to affect overall like physical health and wellness. So the reason why this result of the fruit flies have been so dramatic is because it really showed signs of reduced traits of aging. For instance, insulin resistance and inflammation, which is why the lives of these specific fruit flies were prolonged by 60%. Also, combined with the probiotics was, again, that herbal supplement I mentioned, which is called the Triphala. And it's actually a formulation made from a form of traditional Indian medicine called amalaki, bibihitaki, and haritaki, which are all fruits that are used as medicinal plants, and they've been used for very, very long times for traditional medicines and Indian medicine. So it's really cool. This is part of herbal supplements and homeopathic medicines, and the overall goal of the study really is to try and help apply what's found in this specific study into human disorders like chronic inflammation, depression, irritable bowel syndrome, and even cancer. So it's incredible because we've always known for a long time that the food that we really do take in has a direct impact. But right now, the fact that they're actually doing studies on this, and of all things on fruit flies, which I really didn't know had 70% of a comparison to mammals on a biochemical scale, it's incredible. So I think that that's really cool. And for everyone out there who's been drinking probiotics, that's awesome. And anything with our digestion really, really helps. Because a lot of times, too, you think about it, people say like, oh, I have a gut instinct that the situation is bad. It's like that's part of the gut axis, which is the gut-brain axis, which is like a real study right now that they're working on, is our relation between the gut and the brain.
I'm really intrigued to learn, like, how do you actually like dissect the tiny little fruit fly and
what I was
like
thinking.
get its gut?
Like an
and then,
electron
like, measure the-
microscope and like.
So they actually fed the fruit flies.
Tiny, and then you've got to like, you have to use tiny little surgical tools to like cut the gut out of it.
Or
Like,
maybe you
what?
hire a
How do you
fruit fly surgeon who has like their doctorate and they go in there. I mean, I don't know, maybe they have a cute little outfit.
Well, this specifically, they were only feeding it to the fruit flies, and then they noticed that they were having like a very like prolonged life. But as far as knowing and understanding its biochemical makeup, I'm assuming they probably used microscopes to really figure out how that comparison to mammals. But then understanding as far as how probiotics really affect the gut, that was done in mammals, and that was much bigger to be able to dissect. But as far as dissecting little fruit flies, I don't know if they actually did that. There was nothing I read as far as in this study specifically, because this, again, was just about feeding the fruit flies. But it's still interesting though in humans, you know, how we really can change the structure of that.
And it's fascinating too, because I know you mentioned like the research is still relatively new, and so all of the research going into the gut microbiome and all of its effects on like inflammation and IBS and like even diabetes, it's fascinating, that link. And I mean, probiotics can be delicious. I mean, you got like a lot of fermented foods. You have kimchi, represent, sauerkraut if you're into that, and even like Greek yogurt and whatnot. And it really does kind of help a lot of people. Obviously, that in and of itself won't reverse like a major disease, but it definitely, you know, can contribute to overcoming a lot of things. Yeah. Which is awesome.
Yeah. I love that about what I read.
Food's great.
Food is awesome.
All right.
I'm
so
hungry.
Speaking of food and beverages and healthy things, apparently green tea can help prevent strokes and heart attacks or heart disease?
Well, according to researchers at Lancaster University in the UK, they think that green tea might keep us safe from heart disease. And they published a study in the Journal of Biological Chemistry on May 31, so super recent. But before we talk about green tea, let's talk about heart disease, specifically hardening of the arteries aka atherosclerosis. So sometimes just through everyday life, our blood vessels can get a little damaged, little wear and tear build up there. These buildup of cholesterol attract immune system cells and turn into plaques or hard lumps that stick out and block the flow of blood. And you would think that bringing the immune system cells come into this. Well, the researchers took green tea extract and added it to a solution of apolipoprotein A1, which I'm going to call ApoA1 from now on because it's a mouthful. And here's an image of ApoA1 here. It's made up of a few different chains of molecules to form the protein, and it combined to itself to form a glob, or scientifically that's called an amyloid deposit, which can stick to existing plaques or lumps within your arteries, further restricting the blood flow and damaging your blood vessels. ApoA1 plaques can also destabilize existing buildups, helping them to open up or break off and increase the risk of stroke and heart attack. But the green tea extract, or the researchers made a cup of green tea in the microwave and purified it to make a compound called epigallocatechin-3 gallate, which I'm shortening to EGCG, which also is still a tongue twister, but that's okay. ECGC was able to break the ApoA1 into smaller compounds, into smaller fragments. And so they dissolved in the blood rather than building up into deposits and smashing into the plaques and opening them up. So this could prevent heart attacks and stroke. But there's a few reasons why you shouldn't go chugging liters or gallons for those in imperial units of green tea right now. So this study looked at green tea extract, but actually you need super high concentrations to have that effect. So you need to drink so much green tea that you'd make yourself sick. The researchers think that future work could modify the ECGC so that it would be absorbed easier, and then you wouldn't have to drink so much of green tea to get the same effect. And it was also performed by mixing just like extracts, solutions of molecules together. It wasn't even done inside cells, let alone in a full mouse or a full human. So we don't know if it's going to have the same effect in actual bodily systems. They did, however, do some research on human systems. They got some human blood vessel cells and they added a mixture of ApoA1 and EGCG to see if the reaction of creating the smaller fragments, they wanted to check if the smaller fragments were toxic to the cells. And it turns out they were non-toxic, which is a good sign and probably means that, it's not going to have any bad after effects of, having the ECGC in a human system. But you don't know for sure until we actually test it in humans. So we'll just have to wait for scientists to find a way to make this miracle molecule ECGC better so that it gets exactly to the right place in the body that it needs to go and that there's enough of it there to have the right effect. So stay tuned for that. More work needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm so glad you clarified that as well, that in these studies, oftentimes they're sensationalized in magazines and on newspapers like, oh, green tea can save your life. And of course, green tea is extremely healthy for you and, you should consume it for its other health benefits. But it's so good that you mentioned that these are high concentrations of a very specific molecule. And in order to get that and to extract that from an actual thing of green tea, like you said, you'd make yourself sick and probably live in the restroom for the next week or so. So good on you for mentioning it.
Science. And it was really good research, but yeah, you're right. It gets sensationalized and exaggerated on the amount of impact that it can have. Mm-hmm. So it's really important, when we look at these scientific studies, to think critically and think of how it actually relates to the bigger picture, which is why I wanted to talk about that today.
Exactly, absolutely. So with that being said, that concludes the news segment. We are going to take a very quick commercial break, and when we return, we are going to have a fascinating roundtable discussion on prosthetics. So go ahead and stay tuned.
We've always looked to the stars. They guide us, give us comfort, help us find our way. We see ourselves out there. When we look up, it inspires us. And we long for something we don't yet know. We yearn to go there. So, we venture forth.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not.
Many think we stopped exploring. But we know our journey didn't end.
T-minus 1 minute.
We've only just begun.
Orion is functioning perfectly at this point.
Come with us and explore tomorrow.
Well, hello there, and welcome back. Before we delve into this roundtable discussion, we want to give a big old thank you to our Escape Velocity citizens. These are folks who contribute $5 an episode or $15 a month. Every little bit helps, and we wouldn't continue to be able making these amazing shows if it weren't for you. If you would like to be awesome and become a citizen of tomorrow, head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. All right, ladies, so we have a pretty interesting topic today, and it's actually a topic I personally have never done a whole lot of research on before we just started prepping for this, and that is prosthetics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think this is going to be a really...
Athena,
yeah.
Athena came up with the idea for this one, and as soon as she said that, I was like, wow, this is really something I've not kind of thought about before, and could be super interesting, especially with all the recent advances in this kind of field. So super cool topic idea, Athena.
It was actually my Uber driver that recommended it. He was telling me about Hugh Her, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. And so Hugh Her, for those of you guys that don't know, he not recently, but he ended up losing both of his legs through frostbite when he was like doing mountain climbing, and he ended up completely developing like the next evolution of prosthetics for his legs, and it's incredible, some of the footage, if you guys want to check it out sometime. He's been able to create like extreme biometrics for prosthetics of his limbs and his legs specifically, and he's able to like add all these different components and get it to really resonate well. This is actually an image of him. And I was watching his TED Talk this morning, which was incredible. So I think that I would want to kind of start with where we really started with prosthetics, which is kind of crazy. Like there's some really old fossils, one that was found on an Egyptian mummy from 950 BC, and it was of a toe.
The big toe, exactly.
A big toe. It was like really, really kind of gross looking, but
it looks pretty. I mean, of course, the Egyptians were quite advanced in a lot of their engineering feats, but I mean, this looks pretty like. I don't know. I feel like for an Egyptian toe, like that looks pretty spot on. I'd be cool with that.
And a lot of
that's not the Egyptian toe that we're showing there. This is way further along.
Oh yes.
Like the Kim toes. So we'll come back to that one in a little bit.
Yeah, so like the really big start of prosthetics was started just by like any type of tools that someone can find in their kitchen. So there was some people that actually used the leg of a chair to replace like a leg for a little kid. Yeah. And they really used to use anything, cloth or like leather, and then they would just thread it onto the person, and it never really had much mobility. Just to kind of see really what we've evolved into is quite incredible. But yeah, so this is some of the stuff as far as with prosthetics that I thought was really interesting with the evolution. As far as how that goes. Now I guess there was a little kind of here definition I'll read for you guys, referring to what exactly it is. It refers to prosthesis. I'm not exactly sure which one of you guys wrote this, but I figured I'd read it. It's a definition that's found on medicinenet.com. And it's really interesting. It says it's an artificial substitute or replacement of a part of the body, such as a tooth, eye, or facial bone, or palate, a hip, or knee. And a prosthesis is designed for functionality or cosmetic reasons, or both. So again, I think it's interesting how it went from really like a big necessity to now, I mean, I know we're not going to talk about plastic surgery, but that's even a form it's sort of transitioned into, which is a cosmetic route of replacing items with body parts with actual external items. But yeah.
I think you raised a really good point there. Like you were saying, back in the past with the history, it was very much just making a prosthetic device to fit a function. So if somebody had lost a leg, let's give them a peg leg, from a table.
Yeah, something to balance on, basically. Yeah.
Because you need something to balance, something to hold the weight on the leg.
Minimal functionality, yeah.
Yeah, minimal functionality, and we're moving slowly towards both increasing the functionality and increasing, the look of these items, which is like that toe that we saw before. That is using the latest technology in 3D printing to make a lifelike toe, and that's a company that's called Limbs and Things. Whatever.
I love it.
Limbs and Things.
Limbs are us.
So they're making these realistic, and to me, I don't know, that toe was so gross, but it looks real to me.
I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, they 3D print that to that kind of standard and quality in look and aesthetic, because it's not just for people to actually wear that toe as part of their prosthesis, but in that regard, it's actually used for people to be able to train with surgery. So that particular toe looks gross because it's actually meant to mimic an ingrown toenail, and so surgeons will actually practice doing surgery on those realistic-looking like fake toes. So that's how far we've come in terms of the aesthetic of some prosthesis.
Why would you want to mimic an ingrown toenail? That's interesting. Wow, okay.
And I love that in the chat. Let's see, Rock Rancher brought up like Brahe's nose. So Tycho Brahe, who was of course a huge figure in the evolution of astronomy and did a lot of amazing contributions to the world of astronomy, but a lot of people don't actually know that he actually lost his nose in a duel.
Yes.
And he had like a silver
match,
nose
right?
for a while. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like just went off, and and apparently they replaced it with like he claimed it was silver, or somebody claimed it was silver, but it turns out it wasn't actually silver. But it was a nose made of some sort of metal, which I think is pretty interesting.
That's interesting.
We actually have an image here of the Egyptian toe.
Oh.
So this is kind of, so that's, I think, thousands of years ago, that's what we had in terms of aesthetic. And, it's a pretty good replica. I think it's made of like wood and leather, but, not really like you could touch it. It's not going to feel soft. Like,
of course,
just not quite right. And compare that to the really gross toe that we saw before. There's definitely, oh man, it makes me sick looking at it.
Same.
I'm so into that stuff. I just think it's so cool.
Yeah. So that's the aesthetic kind of upgrade that we've had over all these years. And with new technologies, 3D printing, that's how far we've come, which I think is pretty cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a really good question here, actually, in the chat from Henny's for Werp. Henny's for Werp, I'm going to get that right, especially because the object is interesting in Cosmos. It says, how are 3D printing and carbon affecting newer prosthetics? Are they making things cheaper or less foreign feeling to the wearer? So they actually are working right now on doing 3D printing for prosthetics, which is really cool. I mean, honestly, 3D printing is being incorporated in pretty much any industry right now, and specifically for prosthetics, it is definitely going to be used. I can actually imagine the price probably coming down for that, just because it's utilizing obviously like different types of resources. But specifically right now, what like certain companies are trying to work on is really trying to mimic not just movement of the natural human body, but also like external layers that would be mimicking skin. So one thing that the engineer Hugh Herr is working on right now with his company at MIT is actually working on the tightness and then like the more like loose areas of skin that would be coating around whatever the part is, whether it's the arm or it's the knee, and then looking to mimic also how the spine moves while we walk and be able to incorporate that into the rest of the body. So like the arm and then the legs.
So we actually make finger bone-like structures.
And I believe we have a video
apparently
here, which is it's really cool. If we pull that up, we'll totally show it to you guys. And Yeah,
So we actually make finger bone-like structures by using the 3D printer and then culture the living muscle tissues in between the finger bones. And when we apply the voltage between the living tissues, they actually make a contractions so that the finger bone can move by the power of the muscle contraction.
Wow, yeah, so I think, yeah. Go.
Oh, I just want to explain this one a little bit. This is a group making a biohybrid robot at the University of Tokyo, and that professor was Professor Shoji Takeuchi. And they're actually making what I would call kind of the next generation of prosthetics, where they're taking muscle cells, biological living things, and combining it with like 3D printing and that kind of technology and fusing them together to make things that respond to electrical signals, which is exactly, you know, the same kind of electric signals going through our nerves. So if you scale that up, that kind of, you know, what they've got is small, it kind of just goes like this, but imagine that on a larger scale attaching to, say, like the stump of an arm that's been amputated, and all you're doing is using your nerve signals to control what the prosthesis does when it's actually made from like real muscle. So it has that same reaction that you would have been used to, you know, when you still had your own muscles. So I think that's really cool in terms of mimicking what you were already used to and using that kind of biological memory as well.
Wow, you said that they're using real muscles. Is this part of like, is it a part of like separate growth, and they're working on actually grabbing the cells itself and then regrowing them? I don't know if I missed it, if you said that or not, or the people donating?
There was a little part in that video where it looked like kind of like a Petri dish with some pink liquid in it.
Yeah.
That was a liquid that had muscle cells inside of it, like floating around. And then what they did is they put the 3D printed parts, like a scaffold, I guess, into the solution, and the muscle cells stuck to it and started growing on it and formed into a big long fiber because the scaffold was in the shape of like a big long fiber. And so they just followed that shape and they made the big fiber, and there was a wire at either end. And when they sent the electrical signal down the wire, the muscle cells reacted and they contracted and expanded, and that's how it could like make the thing tick back and forth.
That's awesome. As cool as that is, I have to agree with Smash H. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm so sorry. It has 2 zeros in it. I don't want squishy meat muscles. Give me hydraulics.
Yeah,
I totally.
think that's an interesting comment. I mean,
like
obviously,
what we were talking about earlier.
It's kind of silly, but you know what? You see, like especially in movies, like. You know, when they're portraying those who have lost limbs, they often replace them not with just something that looks like your arm or leg, but like look at Winter Soldier, for instance. Like they gave him a full-blown metal arm that he can like go and do a lot of damage with. And then also we brought up before the show officially started, Rose McGowan in the Planet Terror movie. She had her leg amputated and they replaced it with this like super cool machine gun. Now again, obviously like these are Hollywood, very kind of fanatical examples, but it kind of goes back to show you that we're increasing the functionality of these limbs, but I mean, what if we go beyond just the basic functionality? It's like, oh, you know, I'm getting a new arm. Not only does it act like a normal arm would, but hey, it can also rotate 360 degrees and it can withstand, you know, thousands of degrees in temperature.
Like Robonauts, 360-degree arm.
Oh, you need a lighter? Here, and then you get a little flame coming,
come out. I would totally want to be like a cyborg if that were to happen.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at Nebula in Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, mostly cyborg.
Yeah, and actually Destructor 1701, sorry, just loving all these comments right now. I have to push to these. So these things plus Boston Dynamics plus AI research equals eventual Westworld.
Still need to watch that show.
Yeah, it's
I think Jade has a really, really good point though, like about you know, when we design these devices, do we design them to the specifications of what we had before, the amount of functionality, or do we go beyond that? Do we increase our potential? For example, let's have a look at things like in racing, like people that have amputated legs, and you've got the blades, like Blade Runner. So I did some research on this, and the Rice University studied Oscar Pistorius's blades, and they used 17% less energy than that of elite sprinters on intact limbs. And it took 21% less time for him to reposition and swing his legs back and forth between strides. But then I guess, does that translate into increased performance, you know, in the actual competition? Well, not necessarily, because Usain Bolt's 200-meter time, best 200-meter time is 19.19 seconds. And the record for the T44 class of Paralympics in 200 meters is 21.06 seconds, so slightly slower. And that was set by a New Zealander, Liam Malone, and he runs on 2 blades. And you can see him in this image here. So scientifically, with biophysics, it seems like these prosthetics are giving people an advantage, although when you actually look at the data of like actual races, it maybe not. But who knows, what if these prosthetic devices get even more enhanced with more study into biophysics and how to transfer the energy from the prosthetic itself to the ground and back to make people sprint faster? Like, where do we draw the line? Do we keep making these devices better and better and giving people an advantage? But then what about the people that don't have that advantage? Like, where do we draw the ethical line?
Well, I think it would definitely be on an individual case-by-case basis, because let's say you get into a horrific accident and you do lose, like, your leg below the knee, and it's like, okay, well, let's say it's some time in the future, it's like, okay, you have the option. We can give you like our standard human-looking limb, or you can get this again, I think it's very case-by-case, but you raise an interesting point that in the evolution of the technology, if it gets so advanced and just so kind of complex, what if, I see it merging into kind of the aesthetic surgery like you had brought up, like plastic surgery, in terms of like, well, my arm's fine, it functions, but maybe you can install like a new sensor in here. I want one of those fancy lighter arms, sometime in the future. And of course it's a little extreme, but then again, things like nose jobs and things that seem pretty routine these days, those used to seem extreme. But again, with the advancements in medical technology and just kind of society accepting it in general, I mean, goodness knows what we could be capable of in terms of, I guess, upgrading our bodies.
Yeah, totally.
There's a really good comment from Hannes Web again in Twitch. Do you think there's a trend of prosthetics becoming more real or less realistic but more usable? And I want to put that question out to the chat room as well. What would you prefer? Something more realistic, like 3D printed, like that toe that we saw, or something more usable, like in the form of like a blade for running that could make you run really, really fast? Like, where do you think we should go with that? Realism or functionality, or both?
I think it's good to have both, because again, what you were saying, it's a person-by-person basis, and I feel like there will be some people that are going to want really just more functionality. Maybe some people will want to be like, somehow gain more what we would see as superpowers, because it's just not so human. And some people will say, I just want to be normal again. I just want to look normal again. Like, I want to have my legs, I want to have my toes, I want to just, be fine. But I think that there's some people who, with me personally, and then a lot of other people that are out there working towards, like with Hugh Herr, for instance, he's literally referred to as the biomechanitronic man. And he's really focused on usability. He was able to go mountain climbing again because he's been able to incorporate and interchange his feet. Like, he's been able to put different plates of feet on that have claws all along the outside of the feet, not just where the toes are, but along the heel and everything, to then be able to go rock climbing and be able to do that again and more advanced than he was able to earlier. So I think that it really would be kind of just a person-by-person basis, but I think it's a really good idea to do both. And as far as drawing a line, to be honest, I think that it's just as long as we, as long as we have both, then we will still be able to obviously hold on to still that human aspect. Because otherwise, I think that incorporating AI, incorporating electronics into our bodies, it's still going to have that functionality, but it's going to be able to advance us more. And I think that that's what's really incredible. It's about what are the next steps in our own personal evolution as human beings.
And Destructor 1701 actually sums it up quite eloquently, saying there's a tipping point when prostheses stop being a compensation for lost capacity and start being a desirable augmentation or replacement for existing capability. Very well said. And like you said, like, we're already kind of incorporating electronics into our bodies as it is with, I'm sorry I keep bringing up the comic book references, but look at Iron Man.
I love it.
And, what they had to install in his heart. But, we have all sorts of kind of biomechanical things that help people live and exist and thrive on a daily basis. So you're right, it's like the next step of evolution. Like, we have things that enable your heart to beat so that you can live, but do we have things that will enable your heart to beat forever so that you can live past 120 or 130?
Yeah. I saw also a really good comment from Sparker off of YouTube. They asked, all current robotic prosthesis, sorry about that, prosthesis, I think it's supposed to be an S there, take energy from an accumulator. I am wondering if it's possible to interface the prosthesis with the body to make it operate on natural organisms' energy. Any ideas? And again, I know I keep referring back to Hugh Herr, but again, I was watching his TED Talk this morning, and it was incredible because what Lisa, you were mentioning earlier about the nervous system, they're looking at ways that we can actually be able to full-on operate these external parts that are, going to become part of us. That's the whole point, is not to have it be such an external thing. It's supposed to be really united with our actual physical body. And so they're looking actually at incorporating energy that's generated through our body naturally, and like our static electricity and our nervous system, and be able to generate that into the prosthetics themselves. So to answer your question, I believe they are looking into that, from at least what I've been hearing and reading so far up on this. Yes, like that's full on something that the whole purpose is not to be able to, as great as machines are, they have to be recharged. They have to be plugged into a wall, whatever it is. And being human, we don't have to do that. We have to sleep. But I think that having prosthetics, the whole purpose is to have them be able to run on the own human natural energy. So that's definitely something being worked on right now, and obviously being evolutionized into the next steps. So more human than human. Johnny Spacer.
I had to. I mean, it's Rob Zombie, and my heart fluttered, so that was nice.
I love it. That's.
Yeah, I guess we're curious about, if you're watching this on demand, we want to know what you think. Where do you think prosthetics should go? Should we keep on improving them? Should we integrate them with the body system so that they run off our own energy and the glucose that's in our blood? Like, where do you imagine them going in the next 5-10 years? Mm-hmm. Are we going to look back at this episode today with our bionic eye that can see ultraviolet and my bionic arm that has the power to crush you with my hand, and just laugh at this episode? Where do you think this is going to go? We've got people in Japan, University of Tokyo, that are combining muscle cells with 3D printed parts and electricity and controlling them that way. Exactly. Are we going to go down that path? Are we going to just have designer bodies where we can 3D print? Oh, I don't like the way my legs look. I'm going to 3D print myself a thinner leg. Where is this going to go?
That would be really
Leave
interesting.
A comment.
Yeah, let us know, guys.
Absolutely. And you brought another good point up in terms of, just materials engineering in general has advanced so much in the past decade. And what we're able to 3D print these days with the newest level of Ultimaker is insane. And it's actually being used to 3D print different prosthetics, and using not only materials that are more human-like, but that are lighter. Because I just read right now, and it brought up a good point, a problem that a lot of lower limb amputees have to face is the fact that it takes a big toll on their skeleton when you have to kind of lean on that prosthetic, and they often have to go through hip replacements as a result. So making, potentially engineering either the structure or the material to make it less taxing on the overall body as a system. Because while it's super exciting to think about all of the cool, crazy directions we can take this, there's still, I think, a lot of fundamental issues that are still kind of being worked on to this day. But it's come so far, my goodness, since the old days of the Civil War, when prosthetics were definitely starting to take shape.
Yeah, that's when they really started to evolutionize, was
Absolutely.
After the 2 world wars, just because there was such a massive amount of
carnage.
People losing limbs. There's a really good question here from Johnny Spacer. It says, would you cut off a perfectly good arm for an upgrade? I literally asked that question when I was reading
thinking
this.
that. I was like, oh gosh.
What are your guys' answers? I'm curious.
Maybe not an arm, maybe a finger, maybe a couple fingers. But I don't know about a whole arm. Because then working out would be weird though,
I don't think I would be one of the first people to do it, but if it was a different thing, then yeah. But otherwise, why fix something that's not broken, right? In my opinion, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I was contemplating eyeballs earlier because I have really, really bad vision, and I was thinking about, wow, imagine, like you were saying, Lisa, being able to see all the other like wavelengths of light and the light spectrum.
I feel like
that
that'd
would
be overwhelming, though.
Incredible. Oh, it would be so overwhelming.
You'd be bombarded with just so
but
many,
if you can interchange it constantly, you could be like, now
sensory
I want to see
overload.
X-ray, now I want to see ultraviolet. Now it's like,
Now
you
that
know.
can get into some privacy issues, though. Like I'm looking at you in X-ray right now.
Wait, that's really true. Plus, too, like as great as it is, again, the body has to compensate for those external limbs, whatever it is. So even if we do eventually start doing eyes one day, how is input taking in ultraviolet rays going to affect our brain? It's like that really can be affecting things that are on the back end behind the eyeball.
Exactly.
And that can like totally fry up our nerves, like possibly, and because it's obviously entering it on the inside as opposed to on the outside, and sitting out in the sun and stuff. But yeah, so that was definitely interesting. I wonder if you guys would in the chat would do anything like that as far as testing out a new prosthetic limb or something on your body. But again, there's still that compensation you have to realize that the body has to make up for. If you take a leg off, your whole spine is going to be shifted. And for someone who has both scoliosis and arthritis, it's not fun. You guys don't want to deal with that. But yeah, so that's really.
I mean, I think Jared Head kind of puts it all together pretty nicely, saying, "Call me weird, but I just want to be a full-blown robot already." Is that right, Jared? I like your human self, your soft human self,
I'm tired of my sinuses.
Then get a new respiratory system. Duh.
Yeah.
Obviously.
But yeah, so
I think one last thing I want to add before we go to break. We did talk about having eyes that can see like ultraviolet and stuff. At the moment, people are working on bionic eyes. Where they're at the moment is that they're an array of probes. So, multiple different probes in a formation, usually kind of a square or rectangle formation of probes that get inserted on top of the brain and can stimulate different regions of the brain. And the different number of probes correlates to the number of pixels of light or dark that they can stimulate in that person's vision if they've gone blind. And so each time they improve this technology, they get better and better, they make more and more pixels, but they're still nowhere kind of close to being able to kind of represent like human shapes with the number of pixels that you have. It's like, not even the quality of like games back in like the 1980s number of pixels. Like it's still very, very far off from being something kind of realistic, but people are working on bionic eyes, and I think it's a fascinating area of research that I would love to do a way more in-depth kind of science pod or roundtable discussion on in the future, because what they're doing is really, really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I still want to like talk about more because there's so many good things in the chat right now. But yeah, there's just one awesome thing that I have to bring this up. It's from Mr. BFR. It says, "What would such prosthetics do to the lifespan tending to immortality?" And I mean, I personally feel like, again, like the body, you'd have to constantly be exercising, because if you have prosthetic legs that don't need to be exercised, the rest of your body might actually start to get really, if it's not exercising as much, it gets really reliant on the legs. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it might actually shorten the lifetime. That's my opinion. I wonder if it would actually shorten the lifetime because your body would become more reliant on the prosthetics, which actually have essentially much longer lifetime than us. Not an indefinite lifetime as everything breaks down. But I wonder about that. That was a cool pondering question. I just wanted to give some light to. It's a good question, Mr. BFR. But yeah, so that's nice. What I would think.
Wow.
This was a really awesome conversation.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
prosthetics.
I wasn't expecting to get so kind of sucked into the world of prosthetics, and not even just like the fascinating history, but I had no idea that all of these advancements were being made, and all of these like kind of theoretical ideas were being thrown around in terms of what could potentially happen down the road. So yeah, absolutely. It's exciting. Yeah, maybe you'll see me in 20 years with like a sick new arm, be like, "Hey guys, remember when we talked about prosthetics?" Yeah.
360.
Look at me now. All right. So thank you so much for tuning into that conversation with us. Again, please leave a comment. Where do you think the world of prosthetics are going to go? What issues do you think we have now in the realm of prosthetics that we need to address before we start thinking about those crazy advancements we were mentioning? Please leave a comment below. And who who knows, we'll probably talk about it in the next show. Speaking of comments, we are going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we will be addressing your comments from the last episode. So stay tuned.
Science. It both draws us together and tears us apart. Brings discoveries to cure us and threaten us. It is neither good nor evil. It is what we decide to make of it. There is so much more to learn, and we are curious. Together, let's explore the science of tomorrow.
Hello again, welcome back. Before we delve into comments from the last show, we want to give a nice little thank you to our escape velocity citizens, as well as our orbital citizens, and of course, our suborbital citizens. These folks contribute $2.50 an episode, or $5 a month. Every bit helps, and again, we would not exist if it wasn't for you. So please, if you would like to become a citizen of tomorrow and contribute to our existence, head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. All right, so getting into comments from the last show, which was a whole month ago, we actually got to interview Dr. Helena Braga, who's developing solid-state batteries, which was a very fascinating interview, and a lot to come from the evolution of batteries. So the first comment we have is from Ivailo Ivanov from YouTube. And actually, this comment refers to the show in general, saying, "It will be great to have a science audience that is not part of Tomorrow Space. Invite other science YouTubers like Veritasium as guests to get more subscribers." Boy, wouldn't that be fun.
That would be awesome.
I'd be so fangirly though. I'd just be like, hi. Like, I don't know. That is a great idea though. That's a splendid idea.
I feel like a lot of experimentations would happen as far as like building stuff, and we probably have to go outside.
Turn into the White Rabbit Project real quick.
Yeah, because like rule number one, I think, is no explosions.
Yeah, no fire.
No fire.
We still blow things up though.
I would love to get Derek from Veritasium on, not so that we can get more subscribers, but just because he's really cool.
Exactly.
The whole point of this show is, like, we're not here just to get subscribers. We're here to have cool conversations about cool science and cool topics. So, like, having more subscribers is nice, but that's not why we're here. We're here to have fun and geek out about science. So that's why having Derek is cool.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. We're not just, we're not doing this purely for numbers. Obviously, we're doing it from our hearts. But I think another point they were kind of trying to bring up is that, we because we already have such an amazing audience, and that you guys are so great in terms of how we interact, just broadening that and being able to like have more, people that we can have these conversations with. And Hank Green, if you're listening, man, we got a seat for you. I'll give you my seat. That'd be stoked. I'd be so excited because it was Hank Green's show, the SciShow, that actually really got me into science communications. Because if you've never seen his show, it's just like, you too, Kyle Hill. Because science is a splendid show. Well, great comment. Moving on to Joseph Habdank on YouTube, they commented, "I love the content. There is a real vacuum on YouTube for a deep science show. There's plenty of popular science shows giving short bites, but none of that goes deep. Amazing. You guys could work a bit more on the flow to prepare stories a bit better, but nonetheless a great show. I love you. Bring in people of science, not just journalists." That's awesome. Thank you. And I love it when criticism can be constructive, because yes, it's not easy, but we try. We're working harder every day.
We make good eye contact with each other and the camera and the hologram.
Yeah, but thank you.
Try and predict each other's cues.
I really like the point they raised there about having the real scientists on, not just science journalists. I think that's what kind of sets us apart, or that's what we really wanted to focus on, like having Dr. Helena Braga and having Guy Trudel the month before that. It's all about, or at least for me, bringing on guests that actually do the actual science. So you can ask the questions that you want to ask of the scientists, of what it's like to work in the lab, or what it's like to do that research, or how does this research affect this? Like, we're opening the laboratories up to you guys so that you can ask them these questions.
Yeah, I really love that. A lot of people I've been meeting recently, scientists that are doing incredible things, are starting up companies. They're like, "Come check out my stuff." It's like it's just so great because there's so many amazing things going, and it's their baby. It's the stuff they're working on. So I love that we're able to always bring on those people and interview them and ask them about what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Thanks for the comment.
Absolutely. All right, moving on. Alexander Dearden on YouTube says, all right, this is a little bit of a long one. I really like the content, but there's a but. You guys really should rehearse. It just sounds like you guys are reading stuff out for the first time and that you haven't got any understanding of the science you're reporting on. Sure, I don't expect you to know everything in depth, but it would be nice for you to sound like it's not just reading off a page, and perhaps rehearse some better comments other than, yay, go fuss for. I really think you're onto something, reporting on the real in-depth science. There is definitely a niche, and I'm really glad you guys have diversified. I'm so bored of dumbed-down science, so 10 out of 10 for content, 3 out of 10 for presentation. Oh, one last thing. You guys do an amazing job of bringing in a presenter that isn't in the studio. That is genius. Just get the Lhasa lapel mic so she doesn't sound, oh wait, hold on. Just get the Lhasa lapel mic so she doesn't sound like she's in a bathroom. I assumed because you said last.
We fixed that. Hopefully, I don't sound like potato this week, right? So we fixed that. So this is why your comments are important, because even if they are something to improve on, we read them, we listen to them, and we act on them. And so, like that's why I wanted to bring this comment into the show, to show that we take our criticism on board, and we're always trying to improve.
We take it serious.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Totally.
And like they mentioned, it does sound like we're reading off stuff because sometimes we
falling
are.
guilty for
but
that.
one thing that Dad, aka Ben, always tries to encourage us is just make it sound like a conversation. He always encourages us to really just, talk about it like you're talking to your friend about it. He doesn't like scripts, so, thanks, Dad, for that pointer.
Yeah.
Dad, wherever Dad is. All right. Yeah, no, but thank you. I mean, as much as I was kind of reading that off in a silly way, again, we really do appreciate the constructive criticism, and we appreciate how much time and thought you put into it. So
go phosphor.
Go phosphor.
Love that.
Okay, that's good.
I literally have fallen victim to that.
But
I'll just cheer on whatever thing we're talking about.
I think it's kind of the beauty of being a live show, especially because it's a little, I don't think I could say ballsy. It's a little ambitious. To delve into some of these topics that are a little bit more complex. And so you get to experience the amazing awkwardness that accompanies not exactly knowing what you're going to say next. Goodness knows it happens to me in the real life all the time. So.
Yeah, definitely. But that's why I love that we have a live chat, because we get to constantly talk to you guys.
Yeah.
So that always makes things feel a little more fun.
All right. Sure. Okay, so next comment from Charlie Fox, YouTube, says, great show. Loving the different subjects. Hoping you'll get more shows per month sooner rather than later. But as an avid TMRO observer, I sense some amount of work goes into the shows and growing takes time. I would love to see a periodic update on storage of this. I would love to see a periodic update on storage, as this area of manufacturing and research is going to change the electric grid very fast in the next 10 years.
I love how you just totally changed voices.
Well, because I feel like it's like the comment was two different subjects, and so I was.
Totally.
There you go. There's that live element there for you.
Exactly.
We're perfect.
Yay.
Just kidding.
A periodic
I think
update
we'll get to one show. First, what we'll probably do is one show every 2 weeks, and then eventually one show every week. But right now, I don't think we're in a position, time management wise, and people resource wise, to be able to make that change. And potentially, when more of us move from overseas to the US, that might change as well. So stay tuned, and you should see more Tomorrow Science, by at least the end of the year.
Yeah, and Dada, I think that's exactly what it was. Electrical storage, I think, is what he was referring to. I was trying to figure that out too. I was like, wait, update on storage is the area of manufacturing, because then it says electrical grid very fast in the next 10 years. So the first thing I had to just picture was us in 10 years doing the show. I was like, oh man.
Jeez.
My hair will be falling out. I'm just kidding.
I'm like, I don't want to imagine myself.
Come with some prosthetics. We won't need cranes. We'll have prosthetics. Yeah.
I want to get a bionic face. Sorry, we're going back to that. All right, I'm done. I thought about it though. I think getting a bionic face would be kind of cool. Just half. But like my bad half. My good half will stay. Oh, stop. Well, the good half's blushing now, so thank you. All right, so the next comment that we are actually going to close out with is from Leland Rogers on YouTube. Says, love the t-shirt, one of my favorites. And just so you know, what the shirt said was, there are two kinds of people in this world. Those who can extrapolate from incomplete data. Yep. Get it? Get it? Ha, thank you.
Man.
Wait,
was
hold
wearing-
on. Why don't I get this?
Oh.
There are two kinds of people.
It was the shirt that
Just give it a
it
second.
was the shirt that Sarah was wearing in last month's show.
Oh, Sarah, that's right.
Oh, okay,
Do you get
right.
it? Those who can extrapolate from, here, hold it this way. There are two types of people in this world. Those who can read incomplete statements and know what they mean, or
Okay, I get it. Okay, I get it now. Because that was an incomplete statement. Okay.
But you can sense where I
and
was
I
going
can sense
with
where
it.
it's going. And then those who don't get it will be the ones who are silently awkward like I was. Okay, I get it now.
See, I love those shirts that make you
Oh,
think
gosh.
and then giggle as a result.
More coffee for Athena. No, definitely not more coffee. That's awesome. I like that. I want that shirt
More
now.
coffee for Athena. And then Mr. BFR says, dad joke.
Dad
but we
joke.
all know, I think it's one of the rules of the universe that dad jokes are the best jokes. So, you know,
Are
it is
they?
what it is.
I feel like
All
cat
right.
jokes are the best jokes, but okay. I like cats.
Now, cat
Can I
dad
bring
jokes.
a cat?
All
on
right,
set
so
next time?
with that being said, that concludes the comment section from last month's show. Thank you so much for leaving those awesome comments. Again, if you want to be featured or have the chance to be featured in our next episode, drop some comments. We have plenty to talk about. Keep it nice, keep it PG-13, and we will go ahead and check them out. So before we sign off, we do want to give one final shout out to our ground support citizens. These people contribute $1 an episode or $1 a month. Every bit helps. And again, we would not be able to make these shows if it weren't for you. So if you would like to become a citizen of tomorrow, head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. Next month, we'll have Alex Moss from Canaria Technologies, and she's actually going to talk about wearable fatigue monitoring tech that can help both astronauts and industrial workers on Earth. So that'll be a fascinating conversation, and I'm sure that we'll actually probably reference this roundtable discussion quite a bit during that as well, because I can see some tie over already. So thanks again for joining us and being a part of the conversation, and we will see you next month.